Ex-wife confronts ex-husband after years of silence. Will the truth they buried come to light? Hello everyone, before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main characters. Jessica Miller had spent the last 5 years trying to move on from the life she once shared with Michael Davis. 5 long years since the divorce, and in all that time, she had never once reached out to him. The silence between them had been more than just a lack of communication. It was the echo of a shattered trust, the weight of unspoken words that lingered in the air every time their paths crossed. Michael, on the other hand, had gone on with his life as best as he could. But deep down, he too was haunted by the past, the secrets that he had buried, and the unresolved tension between him and Jessica. It wasn't just the memories of their once happy marriage, but the pain of their final days together, a time when everything seemed to fall apart. And so, it was on one fateful afternoon, when Jessica received a tip that would change everything, that the silence between them finally cracked. The message was simple, yet it carried the weight of a lifetime. You need to speak to Michael. There are things you don't know. Those words, though brief, sparked a fire inside her. She couldn't ignore it. She knew she had to confront him, to finally face whatever truths had been hidden all these years. It was time to find out what Michael had been keeping from her. The decision was made. Jessica stood at the doorstep of Michael's house, her heart pounding in her chest. The years of silence felt like a distant memory, and yet, the pain, the resentment, and the unresolved questions were as fresh as ever. She didn't know what to expect when he opened the door. Would he be defensive? Would he show regret? Or was he the same man who had once betrayed her trust? The door creaked open, and there he was. Michael Davis, standing in front of her, looking just as she remembered, but with something different in his eyes. A hint of guilt maybe, or fear. She couldn't quite tell. It had been years since she had seen him, but the tension between them was palpable. And with that single moment, the confrontation that had been years in the making finally began. The door swung open, and Michael stood there, looking as if time had barely touched him. His expression was unreadable, his posture stiff. Jessica could feel the years of silence between them pressing down on her chest, but she refused to let it break her. She had waited too long for this moment. Michael, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. He didn't say anything at first. His gaze flickered over her face, lingering just a moment too long, before he stepped aside to let her in. The old house smelled the same as it always had, a mix of wood and faintly of cinnamon from the candles they used to burn during the holidays. She hadn't been inside since the divorce, but everything felt familiar yet distant. Michael closed the door behind her, his footsteps quiet as they both stood in the living room, the silence thick and heavy. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke. I didn't think you'd come. His voice was low, almost as if he were speaking to himself more than to her. Jessica crossed her arms over her chest, a defensive gesture she couldn't shake. I'm not here for small talk, Michael, she said, her voice sharp but controlled. I need answers. Michael looked away, running a hand through his hair, something he always did when he was nervous or avoiding the truth. It's been a long time, Jess, he said, his tone softening slightly. Things aren't as simple as you think. Jessica's heart pounded in her chest. She had waited so long to hear those words, yet, now that they were out there, she felt a wave of frustration building inside her. I don't care about your excuses, she said, stepping closer. I want the truth. The whole truth. The one you buried all those years ago. Michael took a deep breath, his hands shaking slightly. He looked at her, and for the first time, Jessica saw something different in his eyes, something vulnerable, maybe even regretful. It's not easy, Jess, he said, his voice cracking slightly. There's more to everything than you know. Jessica's patience was wearing thin. Then tell me, she said, her voice rising. What happened? What did you hide from me? Why did we end up like this? Michael turned away, pacing a few steps before stopping near the window. His back was to her, and Jessica could feel her anger simmering. She had come here for answers, not to be met with silence and vague responses. He sighed, and when he finally spoke again, his words were slow, almost as if he were weighing each one carefully. There are things I didn't tell you because I thought I was protecting you, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. But I see now that keeping those things from you was the biggest mistake I ever made. Jessica's mind raced. What could he possibly be talking about? What could be so important that he had kept it from her for all these years? The air between them was thick with tension, and Jessica could feel the weight of the truth pressing down on her. She had come here looking for closure, but now, all she could do was wait. Wait for him to finally tell her everything. It felt like an eternity, but then, Michael turned around, and when he spoke again, it was with a finality that made Jessica's blood run cold. You weren't the only one hiding things, Jess, he said, his gaze unwavering. I was hiding things from you too. Things that could change everything. Michael's words hung in the air, a heavy silence settling between them. Jessica stood there, trying to process what he had just said. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael took a step closer, his eyes meeting hers with an intensity that made her heart race. There are things from the past, things that happened before everything fell apart. I thought keeping them from you would protect you, he said, his voice filled with a mixture of regret and guilt. Jessica's mind was spinning. What could possibly be so important, so dangerous, that he felt the need to keep it hidden all these years? Protect me? She repeated, the disbelief clear in her tone. From what, Michael? From the truth? He shook his head slowly, as if the weight of his own words was too much to bear. I didn't want to drag you into it. You were already hurting, and I couldn't bear the thought of making it worse. Jessica's frustration was building, but so was her curiosity. She needed to know. She had to know. What is it? What is it that you've been hiding? She demanded. Michael looked away for a moment, as if trying to gather his thoughts. When he spoke again, his voice was softer, almost hesitant. It's about the reason we broke up, the reason I left, he said, his words laced with a sadness that Jessica hadn't expected. There was someone else, Jess. Jessica's breath caught in her throat. She had always suspected something, but hearing him admit it out loud was different. Someone else? She repeated, her voice trembling. You left me for someone else? Michael's face twisted with pain, his eyes filled with regret. No, it wasn't like that. I never wanted to hurt you, but I wasn't being honest with you, with myself. There was a woman I met, and she became part of my life in a way I didn't know how to handle. I thought I could keep it all together, that it wouldn't affect us. But I was wrong. I couldn't keep lying to you. The room felt smaller suddenly, as if the walls were closing in around her. Jessica's mind raced, trying to process everything. She had always known there was more to the story, but to hear him confess like this, so openly, was like a punch to the gut. And you thought hiding that from me would make it better? She asked, her voice steady but laced with disbelief. Michael nodded, his eyes downcast. I thought if you didn't know, it wouldn't hurt you. But I see now how wrong I was. I should have told you the truth, Jess. I should have been honest from the beginning. Jessica's hands clenched into fists at her sides, the anger rising again, but it was mixed with something else, something deeper. The betrayal. The years of wondering what had gone wrong. The unanswered questions. So, this woman, was she the one you chose over me? She asked, her voice sharp. Michael winced, the question hitting him harder than he expected. No, he said quickly, his voice urgent. No, Jess. It wasn't like that. It wasn't about choosing her over you. It was about my own confusion, my own mistakes. I thought I could fix everything without telling you, but I couldn't. Jessica stood there for a moment, taking it all in. The weight of his confession hung heavily in the air, but she still wasn't sure if she could trust him. The years of silence had built a wall between them, and now, it felt like every word was another brick in that wall. "Why now?" she asked, her voice quieter this time. "Why tell me this now, after all these years?" Michael looked up at her, his face a mixture of guilt and desperation. "Because I can't keep living with this lie, Jess. I can't keep pretending that everything is fine when it's not. I owe you the truth. I owe you more than this silence." Jessica swallowed hard, her emotions swirling inside her. She didn't know what to feel anymore. Betrayal, anger, confusion, everything was flooding her all at once. But beneath it all, there was something else. Something she couldn't quite name. "I need time," she said finally, her voice breaking slightly. "I need time to process this. I can't just forgive you right now." Michael nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I know," he said softly. "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know the truth." And with that, the silence returned, this time heavier than before. The silence between them stretched on, thick and suffocating. Jessica stood there, still trying to process what Michael had just told her. The truth was out in the open now, but it didn't bring her the sense of relief she had expected. Instead, it left her with 1,000 more questions, each one swirling in her mind, demanding answers. She had thought that confronting him would give her the closure she needed, but now, it seemed like the story was far from over. "I don't know what to say." She finally spoke, her voice shaky but firm. Michael, still standing across from her, looked like he wanted to say something, but the words didn't come. Instead, he just nodded, understanding the weight of her confusion. "You don't have to say anything right now," he replied quietly. "I know I've put you through a lot, and I'm not asking for your forgiveness. I just needed you to know the truth." Jessica's heart felt heavy, burdened by the knowledge that everything she thought she knew about their marriage had been a lie. The man she had loved, the man she had trusted, had kept secrets from her. But it wasn't just the affair that stung. It was the realization that Michael had never truly trusted her with the whole story. The betrayal was deeper than she had imagined. "How long?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Michael's gaze dropped to the floor, a pained expression crossing his face. "It started a few months before we broke up," he admitted. "I didn't know what to do, Jess. I was lost, confused. I thought I could fix everything without telling you, without hurting you. But I see now that I only made it worse." Jessica closed her eyes, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. The memories of their time together, the laughter, the love, they all felt like they belonged to someone else. How had it all gone so wrong? "So, you kept this from me all this time?" she asked, her voice breaking. "All these years, you've been living with this secret, and I had no idea." Michael stepped forward, his voice softening. "I know I hurt you, Jess. I can't take back what I did, but I'm telling you now because I can't live with the guilt anymore. I should have told you sooner. I should have been honest from the start." Jessica's hands trembled at her sides, the anger bubbling up again. "You think this makes it better?" she asked, her voice rising. "After everything, you think telling me this now is going to fix anything?" Michael flinched, but he didn't back down. "I don't expect it to fix anything," he said quietly. "I just wanted to give you the truth. I owe you that much." The room felt like it was closing in around her. She had come here looking for answers, but now that she had them, it didn't feel like enough. The betrayal ran deep, and the hurt was more than she could bear. But still, part of her wondered if there was more. Was there something else he hadn't told her yet? "What else, Michael?" she asked, her voice steady but laced with suspicion. "Is there anything else you're hiding from me?" Michael hesitated, his eyes shifting uncomfortably. For a moment Jessica thought he might say no, that there was nothing more. But then, his gaze hardened, and he spoke again, his voice low and filled with a quiet intensity. "There's something else," he admitted. "But it's not something I'm proud of." Jessica's heart skipped a beat. What could be worse than the affair? What other secrets could he possibly have kept from her? Tell me, she demanded, her voice firm. Michael took a deep breath, his hands clenched at his sides. I wasn't just hiding the affair from you. I was hiding the fact that I was trying to fix things with her while we were still together. I was torn, Jess. I didn't know what I wanted, and I thought I could have both worlds. The weight of his confession hit Jessica like a tidal wave. She couldn't speak, couldn't process what he had just said. She had thought she understood the situation, but now it felt like the ground beneath her was shifting. You were seeing her while we were still married? She asked, her voice barely audible. Michael nodded, his expression pained. I was. And I hate myself for it. I thought I could keep it all together, but I couldn't. And now I'm left with nothing but regret. Jessica took a step back, her mind spinning with the implications of his words. How could he have done this? How could he have torn their lives apart like this? The anger inside her was almost overwhelming, but beneath it was a deep sadness that she couldn't shake. I don't know what to say anymore, she whispered. I need time. I can't deal with all of this right now. Michael nodded again, his face filled with guilt and sorrow. I understand. Take all the time you need. I just want you to know that I'm sorry, Jess. For everything. And with that, Jessica turned and walked out the door, leaving Michael standing there, a man broken by his own mistakes, while she faced the truth she had spent so long trying to avoid. It had been days since Jessica had walked out of Michael's house, and in that time, she had done nothing but replay their conversation over and over in her mind. She had asked for the truth, but now that she had it, she didn't know what to do with it. The hurt, the betrayal, it was all too much to process at once. She had spent so many years believing in the version of their marriage that Michael had presented to her, the version where everything had fallen apart because of irreconcilable differences, not because of lies and deceit. She had spent so many years asking herself what went wrong, and now, the answer was clear. But knowing the truth didn't make it any easier to bear. Jessica spent her days trying to go through the motions of life, but everything felt different. Her once calm routine had been shattered. Every time she saw something that reminded her of Michael, every time she thought about the life they had shared, she felt a wave of sadness and anger. But what hurt the most was the feeling of being betrayed by someone she had loved and trusted so completely. It wasn't just the affair. It was the years of pretending that everything was fine when it wasn't. It was the realization that their marriage had been built on a foundation of lies, that Michael had kept her in the dark about so much. One evening, as she sat at her kitchen table, staring at the phone in her hand, she felt an overwhelming need to speak to him again. She didn't know why. Maybe it was because she still didn't have all the answers. Maybe it was because, despite everything, a part of her still missed him. She picked up the phone and dialed his number, her heart racing as it rang. The call connected, and Michael's voice came through, sounding hesitant but relieved. Jessica? He said, as if he hadn't expected her to call. Is everything okay? Jessica took a deep breath, her fingers tightening around the phone. I've been thinking about what you said, she began, her voice shaky but determined. And I still have more questions. I need to know everything, Michael. I can't keep carrying this around without understanding it fully. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I understand, Michael finally said. I'll tell you whatever you need to know. I owe you that much. The conversation that followed wasn't easy. Jessica asked him about the affair, about how it had started, and why he had chosen to keep it a secret for so long. She listened as Michael admitted his mistakes, his regrets, and his confusion at the time. He told her how he had tried to fix things with the other woman while still living in their marriage, how he had never truly understood what he had until it was almost too late. For hours they talked, and with each word, Jessica felt the weight in her chest lift just a little. But as the conversation drew to a close, she still didn't feel the closure she had hoped for. She had learned more about Michael's mistakes, but it didn't change the fact that those mistakes had torn their lives apart. And as much as she wanted to believe him, part of her still couldn't fully trust him again. I don't know where we go from here, Jessica said quietly. I don't know if I can ever forgive you for what you did. Michael's voice softened, and she could hear the regret in his words. I don't expect forgiveness, Jess. I just wanted you to know the truth. I wanted you to know how sorry I am for everything. Jessica hung up the phone, her mind still racing with everything they had talked about. She had asked for the truth, and now she had it. But the truth wasn't enough to erase the pain, the betrayal. She wasn't sure if she would ever be able to move past what had happened. All she knew was that she couldn't keep holding on to the past. She couldn't keep living in the shadow of the mistakes they had both made. And yet, deep down, she knew that healing would take time. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only way forward. For now, all she could do was take it one day at a time, and hope that eventually, she would find peace. She closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and let the tears fall. The road ahead was uncertain, but at least she had the truth now, and with that maybe she could begin to heal. It had been weeks since their last conversation, and Jessica was no closer to understanding what she wanted. The truth Michael had shared with her still weighed heavily on her heart, but there was something inside her that refused to let it define her. She had spent so many years trying to keep their marriage intact, fighting for something that now felt like it had never truly been hers to begin with. But as she went through the motions of her day, it became clear that the healing process wasn't going to be as simple as she had hoped. Some days she would feel a wave of anger, remembering all the years that Michael had kept secrets from her, hiding the truth when she had trusted him with everything. Other days she would feel an overwhelming sadness, as if the weight of their past was too much for her to carry. And then there were the quiet moments, when she could almost hear his voice in her head, telling her how sorry he was, how he regretted everything. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that no amount of apologies would ever change what had happened. There was a part of her that longed for things to be different, that wanted to believe that they could somehow go back to the way things were. But she knew deep down that wasn't possible. She couldn't just erase the past. The betrayal was still fresh, still raw, and it was something she couldn't easily forgive. Yet, despite everything, there was a part of her that still missed him. She missed the way they used to talk for hours, the way he would make her laugh, the way they could share their dreams and fears with each other. But she also knew that the man she had loved was gone. The person standing in front of her now wasn't the same. The trust they had once built was shattered beyond repair. She had tried to move forward, to find peace, but every time she thought she was getting closer, something would bring her back to the same place of confusion and hurt. It wasn't fair. She had given so much of herself to him, and in return, she had received nothing but lies. She had tried to see the good in him, tried to believe that he was capable of change, but now she wasn't so sure. Was he truly sorry for what he had done? Or was he just saying what he thought she wanted to hear? As much as she wanted to believe in his remorse, part of her couldn't help but wonder if he was just trying to make himself feel better. After all, if he truly cared, why had he waited so long to tell her the truth? Why had he let their marriage fall apart before he admitted to the things he had kept hidden? Jessica sat at the edge of her bed, staring out the window at the darkening sky. The world outside seemed so calm, so still, and yet her mind was in turmoil. The questions, the doubts, they were never-ending. She knew she couldn't keep living like this, stuck in a cycle of anger and regret. She needed to move on. But how? How could she move on from a love that had been so real, so deep, and yet had turned into a source of so much pain? She thought about what Michael had said. I owe you the truth. But the truth didn't make everything okay. It didn't erase the years of hurt. It didn't fix the damage that had been done. For the first time in a long while, Jessica allowed herself to cry. Not for Michael, not for their lost marriage, but for herself. For the woman who had spent so many years hoping, believing, and waiting for something that was never going to happen. She wiped her tears away and took a deep breath. She knew that this was just the beginning of her journey. It wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But maybe, just maybe, she could start to heal. Slowly. One step at a time. Days passed, and Jessica found herself standing at a crossroads. She had taken the first step toward healing, but there were moments when she felt overwhelmed by the weight of her emotions. Every part of her life felt like it had been disrupted, like the ground beneath her was constantly shifting. She had always prided herself on being strong, but now, in the wake of everything that had happened, she felt like she was struggling just to keep her balance. The truth Michael had revealed had cracked open something deep within her. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was the realization that her life had been built on something that had never truly been real. The man she had loved, the person she had given her heart to, had kept so much hidden from her. And while his apology had been heartfelt, it hadn't taken away the pain. No amount of regret or explanations could change the fact that their marriage had ended in a way that she never could have imagined. But Jessica knew one thing: she couldn't keep living in the past. She had to move forward, even if she wasn't sure how. It wasn't going to be easy, and she wasn't going to rush it. She had to allow herself the time to heal, the space to process everything she had learned, and the strength to let go of the anger that had consumed her for so long. She started with small steps. She began going for long walks again, something she had always enjoyed before everything fell apart. The rhythmic motion of her feet against the pavement gave her a sense of calm, a fleeting feeling of peace. She had also reached out to a few close friends, people who had always supported her, who had seen her through the toughest times. It wasn't easy to open up to them, but she knew that she needed their support, especially now. One evening, while having coffee with her best friend Claire, Jessica finally admitted something she hadn't been able to say out loud before. "I miss him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I miss everything we had. I miss the way it felt to be loved by him." Claire looked at her, her expression a mixture of understanding and concern. "I know, Jess. I know you do. But you have to remember, the love you had wasn't the whole picture. He wasn't the person you thought he was." Jessica nodded slowly. "I know. But it doesn't make it hurt any less." She paused, staring into her coffee cup. "I just don't know how to move on from it all. I don't know how to let go of him when I still love him." Claire reached across the table and placed her hand over Jessica's. "You will," she said softly. "You'll find a way. But it's going to take time. You can't rush it, and you can't expect yourself to have all the answers right now. Just take it one day at a time." Jessica let out a shaky breath. She knew her friend was right. Healing was a process, and it wasn't something that could be forced. As much as she wanted to be okay, as much as she wanted to move on, she had to give herself permission to feel the pain, to grieve the loss, and to slowly start rebuilding her life. The next few weeks were filled with ups and downs. Some days she felt like she was making progress. She felt stronger, more like herself. Other days, the weight of everything still felt unbearable. But through it all, she kept going. She kept putting one foot in front of the other, even when it felt impossible. Jessica had learned that healing wasn't linear. There would be days when she took 2 steps forward and then stumbled back. But that was okay. What mattered was that she kept moving forward. She knew that, in time, she would find herself again. She would find peace again. And though she didn't know what the future held, she was finally ready to embrace it. With each passing day, Jessica was learning to let go, not of the love she had for Michael, but of the hurt, the betrayal, and the anger. She was learning to forgive herself, to accept that not everything was her fault. And most importantly, she was learning that she deserved more than the pain she had endured. It was a long road ahead, but Jessica was ready to walk it, one step at a time. It had been a few months since Jessica had made the decision to start moving forward, and though the process hadn't been easy, she was beginning to feel a sense of clarity. She had spent so many years holding on to the past, to the memory of a love that had once seemed perfect, but now, she was learning to embrace the idea that her life could be something new. She wasn't quite sure what the future would look like, but she was finally ready to let go of the resentment, to stop letting her past control her every decision. One evening, as she sat in her favorite chair with a cup of tea, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire. I found a place. It's small, but I think you'll like it. For the first time in a while, Jessica felt a spark of excitement. The thought of starting fresh in a new place, of creating a space that was entirely her own, was both terrifying and thrilling. She had spent so much time in the house she had once shared with Michael, holding on to the memories of a life that was no longer hers. The idea of moving on, of physically leaving that chapter behind, felt like the next logical step. The following weekend, Jessica and Claire drove to the new apartment. It was a cozy space, tucked away in a quiet neighborhood, with big windows that let in the sunlight and a little balcony that overlooked a park. It was simple, but it had potential. As they walked through the rooms, Jessica could already imagine how she would make it her own. The living room would be perfect for reading and relaxing, the bedroom was just the right size for her to create a peaceful sanctuary, and the kitchen was just big enough for her to start experimenting with new recipes, something she had always wanted to do but had never made the time for. As they walked out to the balcony to look at the view, Claire turned to her with a smile. "What do you think?" she asked. Jessica took a deep breath, looking around one more time. "I think it's perfect," she said, the words coming easily. It wasn't just the apartment that felt perfect, it was the sense of possibility that came with it. This was her fresh start, her opportunity to rebuild. The next few weeks flew by in a whirlwind of packing, sorting, and making decisions. The move wasn't easy, and there were moments when Jessica felt overwhelmed by everything she was leaving behind. But with each box she packed, with each piece of furniture she arranged in her new space, she could feel herself getting stronger. Slowly but surely, the sadness began to fade, replaced by a sense of pride in the life she was creating for herself. She wasn't doing this for anyone else, she was doing it for her. One night, as she sat in her new living room, surrounded by boxes that still needed to be unpacked, she finally allowed herself to relax. For the first time in months, she felt at peace. The weight of her past, the pain of her failed marriage, had begun to lift. She wasn't completely healed, but she was getting there. And for the first time in a long time, Jessica felt hopeful about the future. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be easy, but she also knew that she was strong enough to face whatever came her way. She had survived the storm, and now it was time to rebuild her life, piece by piece. The journey was far from over, but Jessica was finally starting to believe that she was worthy of the happiness and peace that she had been searching for all along. It had been a few months since Jessica had moved into her new apartment, and she was beginning to feel the weight of the changes that had taken place. Her life had shifted in ways she hadn't expected, but she was slowly finding comfort in the new routine she had created for herself. The apartment was starting to feel like home, with little touches of her personality woven into every room. The plants she had carefully chosen were thriving in the windows, and the soft, warm light from the lamps made the space feel cozy, inviting. It wasn't perfect, but it was hers. She had spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that had happened with Michael, the pain, the betrayal, and the healing process that was still underway. It wasn't always easy, and some days were harder than others, but Jessica was starting to realize that the process of moving forward wasn't just about letting go of the past, it was about reclaiming her life, piece by piece. One afternoon, as she sat in the park near her apartment, enjoying the fresh air, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Claire. "Lunch tomorrow? I think we both need a good chat." Jessica smiled at the message, grateful for her friend's constant support. She hadn't seen Claire as much lately, caught up in her own life and the process of settling in. But she knew that spending time with her friend, talking about everything and nothing, would be exactly what she needed. The next day, they met at a small cafe, a cozy spot that Jessica had come to love. Over coffee and sandwiches, they talked about the changes in Jessica's life, her new apartment, and her journey toward healing. "I'm proud of you, Jess," Claire said, her voice warm with affection. "I know it hasn't been easy, but look at you. You're doing it. You're building something new for yourself." Jessica smiled, but there was still a tinge of uncertainty in her voice when she spoke. "I don't know if I'm fully there yet," she admitted. Some days I feel like I'm still carrying all that hurt around with me. I don't know if I'll ever completely get over what happened. Claire nodded, understanding. It's okay not to be fully healed. The important thing is that you're moving forward, and you're not letting the past define you anymore. Healing takes time, and sometimes, it's a little messy. But you're strong, Jess. You've always been strong. Jessica felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. It was hard to believe at times that she had the strength to get through everything, but Claire's words reminded her of how far she had come. Thank you, Claire, she said softly. For everything. As they finished their lunch, Jessica realized that, for the first time in a long time, she wasn't focused on what she had lost. She wasn't thinking about Michael, or the hurt, or the mistakes they had both made. Instead, she was focused on herself, on the life she was building. She was starting to embrace the idea that her happiness wasn't dependent on anyone else. It wasn't about waiting for someone else to make her feel whole. It was about learning to be whole on her own. The rest of the afternoon was spent talking about plans for the future, about dreams and aspirations. For the first time in a long while, Jessica felt hopeful. She knew there was still work to be done, but she was no longer afraid of the future. She wasn't sure what it would bring, but for the first time, she was ready to face it head-on, with her heart open and her mind focused on the possibilities. She didn't need the past to define her anymore. She was writing her own story, one chapter at a time.